This is the Winning Plays Podcast on the CLNS Media Network, the leading online provider for the NBA's winningest franchise.
Winning Plays Podcast is officially back. Whew.
Did
Forsberg. We took a break last time we talked, Chris. It was exploring trade opportunities last week. Marcus Smart was a member of the Celtics. We were throwing around Malcolm Brogdon deals, Peyton Pritchard deals. We weren't wrong.
No.
But now we're a week later. The Celtics have made 5 trades.
5 2/3 of a trade.
5 2/3 of a trade, excuse me. In 48 hours. Ooh, I didn't even get that at first. Well done.
Yeah.
And then now, and we're still a week away from free agency. So I have the dust has settled. We're roughly 36 hours out from the Marcus Smart trade going down. And I want to start there for a few because this is the biggest story of the occasion, and is them pulling the trigger on this, how they're doing it, what they got for it, what they're getting back. We talked about it on the Celtics Talk Pod a bit, but things obviously have changed since then.
Just a little bit.
Where are you at now? 36 hours out.
I'm still at the what I hope is the sort of tail end of the uber emotional, like, we all knew going into the offseason. How many times did we write that or at least one of Malcolm Brogdon, Marcus Smart, and Derek White was not going to be back? And I think we all knew Derek White was the least likely to be moved, that it felt that Malcolm Brogdon was the most likely to move, and that, there was some weirdness that could happen that Marcus Smart would be moved. It's still just the way everything played out made it a little bit more surprising and jarring when at the stroke of midnight on Thursday morning, I guess, we find out that Marcus Smart is headed to the Grizzlies. And well, if you would brace yourself for like, okay, I get it, they have to move on from Brogdon, all this sort of second apron stuff. But now to have to include Marcus Smart just made it so much more jarring to a fan base, and just everything that they've been through with Marcus Smart and the admiration that the fan base has for him. It's just going to take some time to get past that, and that wound will be reopened whenever the Grizzlies come to town. I understand it. I still don't think it's ideal, and yet, like, undeniably, I think if you start putting the pieces together, deals like that don't just magically materialize, and that the Celtics probably maybe had a secondary move if they were going to trade Malcolm Brogdon. It does complicate what happens from here, but my long-winded way of saying, not ideal, but I get it. The haul is pretty good, and at some point I'll be able to just kind of focus on the Porzingis part of it and the pick part of it. But right now, you just sort of, hey, I can't. The reason your podcast is named is leaving town,
right? And we'll have to put it to listeners in terms of whether there's the adjustment being made or not. But on that front, but no, it's yeah. I think the rumors were just so loud that it was that Brogdon. I think everyone in the Celtics fan base had mentally prepared. Okay, this is like, it's Brogdon. Like that's and then it was that silence, and during that hour to 2 hours where everything was up in the air. But this was always, like you said, this was always on the table. This has been on the table for the last couple off seasons to various degrees here. Mm-hmm. And I honestly look at it now, the more I look at the deal, is like, this was just too good of an offer to turn down. And when you consider the fact that they kind of put themselves in the corner here with how they align a lot. And then if you want to look at it from that picture of like bad luck with Brogdon's injury, but you can just go back to last summer now being like, okay, like they just traded for an extra guy they didn't need, and it gave them extra flexibility to do this. Mm-hmm. But ultimately that deal, maybe been the beginning of the end of Smart's tenure, especially when this new CBA came out.
And I think that's more the general storyline here is the more, like, every team in the league is going to be confronted with tough decisions now about who is your core, who are you riding forward with. And, when we were talking about it on Celtics Talk, like the one thing that didn't make sense to us is there was a report that the Celtics were already going to kind of embrace extension options with Porzingis. And we're like, how? Like, it felt like it was supposed to be a 1-year rental, and that gives you the flexibility to sort of address things next summer when Jalen's Supermax kicks in and when tougher decisions have to come, I think it's pretty clear now, like they've got to pave the way to somehow carry 3 gigantic salaries, because the plan sure seems to be that Jason, Jalen, and Porzingis are the long-term plan. And then you're going to figure out the supporting cast around them. And man, that gets tough when you start looking at the cap numbers. And I don't even know exactly how you can make it work. But I guess they're just like, you know what? We're going to see how it looks. We're going to pay the money to make that the long-term plan. And then we're just going to figure it out.
Or we're going to have enough second round picks to move off of
right.
what the deal we want to move off of in due time. But yeah, it's certainly, I mean, the Celtics can offer Porzingis the extension. I believe July, the start of free agency, end of the moratorium, July 6th, July 7th. It'll be, I mean, we won't know until then in terms of like how much those sides have talked already, if there's something that's under their hat already, or whether this is a situation where both sides say like, all right, let's let this play out. Obviously, Porzingis probably wants things right. He's a 7'3" guy with coming off an ACL tear like 5 years ago. He's going to want to get that locked in. But whether or not the Celtics have their book set up for that, as you alluded, is probably going to depend a lot on what happens here in the next week. Let's go down the line here. You talked to Brad Stevens one-on-one, which will be up on NBC Sports Boston, the Celtics Talk podcast on Friday here. What stood out to you in that conversation, and there's a lot of layers here beyond the line in terms of Smart's gone, Malcolm Brogdon is back for now, for good. I don't know what's the deal there, and I mean, what stood out to you most about the conversation there?
So a couple things. Like one, I mean, you can tell how stung Brad is having to deal Smart. He talks a lot in the interview about when you've coached someone, you have that relationship, and now to move to that spot, and in much the same way that like the Isaiah Thomas situation tore at him. But at least then he was the coach. It wasn't him making that decision, right? Like, it's like, hey, Danny's trading you, man. Like, it's not my thing. Now it's him making that decision. He actually talks about, like, almost very similar to Isaiah. He's like, there comes a point where you have to say, like, yes, we're making this move. And there was a pause there because he just didn't know if he could make it. But, so there's just a human side of all of this. And he really loves Marcus Smart, loves and trusts, like the love and trust era. So that was really hard for him. The other hard part now is having to walk it back with Malcolm Brogdon. And so Brad alluded to it, I think, a little bit last night, but he kind of gave me a little bit more info here. It sounds like they're going to give Brogdon 4 to 8 weeks on the advice of doctors to rest this arm, with hopes that, that's enough to get him in a spot where they don't have to go in surgically. But yeah, like it's obviously still on the table and figure that out. But Brad said he talked with Malcolm, and they're hopeful that, this isn't Brad, this is me. Like, however this plays out, like, I think there's a really good chance he's back. It's going to be harder to move him given all the circumstances at play here and the health issue. So if he is back, I think Brad continues to say that they expect him to be, what he was last year and a really impactful player. The caveat to all of this is that having that $22 million back on your books really complicates things. It pretty much eliminates a lot of avenues in terms of like grant. It puts a squeeze even on just using the taxpayer mid-level. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they're still pondering what's out there. But I mean, we were going through it and trying to find a Brogdon trade before the Clipper deal, and it was tough. I think it got a lot more difficult, and I think they're hoping that Brogdon is a true professional if he is back here.
All right, let's take a break here to hear from our sponsor, FanDuel. Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/Boston to join today. Now, right now, fallen during the MLB season, the Red Sox have been up and down. It's been a rough run for them lately. And to be honest, if I'm looking at bets on the Red Sox right now, their offense has been terrible lately. So I'm betting the under on those run totals in a lot of these games lately, because the Days have not been putting anything on the board. But you can check those out and a bunch of other possibilities And don't forget your chance to make your first no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/Boston to sign up. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball trademarks user permission. And I mean, they know, it would seem like right now that they don't have a option until free agency starts here, because all these teams are going to want to see, okay, who do we get? Who might have cap space left over? But they did set themselves up here a little bit with these deals and with their draft night deals,
right,
to have, okay, we have the extra ammo here. If we see an opening that we like with Brogdon that lets us go after player X, but no, it's like Brogdon is still with Smart out now. Like, yeah, there, of course there's a role for Brogdon on this team. And is it the contract you want to fit everyone else in? Not necessarily, but you're not going to just like give up assets to give that up at this point without having a viable alternative in place. Whether that alternative is in place is Grant Williams or something else like that. I guess that's the interesting question for the next week.
And I think if you're being honest, like, who is more likely to play next season, Malcolm Brogdon or Grant Williams? Well, last year suggests that Joe Mazzulla is far more likely to play Malcolm Brogdon. So if ultimately that's what it comes to, I think they'll live with it. The problem is you got to get off that money by the summer of 24. And so it's just going to put a little bit of a squeeze on you at a time when a lot of teams around the league are looking at that second apron and going, oh, bleep, we need to move. And so that deal falling apart has complicated matters for the Celtics. And what I'm sure they're still thrilled with the potential of what happens with Porzingis, just adds another layer to this offseason and how it's built. But yeah.
What's your gut to what would you do in this situation? Like, are you prioritizing me? Like, listen, this is going to be awkward. Like, we're going to have to deal with them anyway eventually. Like, let's rip off Band-Aid. Or do we say, like, hey, like, we can still, he was pretty good last year for us. We won't overuse him again. Derek's going to be starting. Like, and then maybe if things go well, we can keep him, or we can flip him at the deadline if we need to.
So I thought one of the more interesting lines from Brad last night was when he noted, I haven't used any first round picks, and I don't know, it's going to be a while. And that to me was just like maybe a little hint that maybe more first round picks could be spent to tidy up this roster situation. So I think you're always still looking for a potential, because again, the long-term implications of it are complicated. That being said, it's not the worst thing if he's back. I think the other thing at play here is, do they have another shoe to drop with the point guard position? Like, let's say in a vacuum that they were going to make that Porzingis Brogdon trade, but they had the Smart deal on the back burner.
Right.
Was Tyus coming to Boston in that instance? Was he being redirected to a third team, but they had a plan to add another point guard? Are you just riding with Peyton Pritchard in an expanded role this year? So some of that factors into the decision as well. It's like, do you need another guard? Is it just, okay, instead of getting someone that maybe had a shorter term deal that we could have slotted, like, is it just riding with Brogdon now and figuring that money part of it out? But yeah, like, I just think it's interesting to try to connect all the dots.
All right, let's wrap up on this. Just like the roster as composed right now, it's like you alluded that there's work to be done here. But you can go in all sorts of directions here in terms of where you want to like go at. They drafted a wing. It looks like a defensive minded wing at 38 here in Walsh. I assume he'll be on the 15-man roster next year. He looks young, but certainly that's a need that they have on this roster. Like, just that low cost defensive upside guy who may or may not be ready to play. We'll find out in summer league, but that's, will at least be one slot to build some wing depth, which is clearly needed there behind Jason and Jalen. But like, where do you go right now? Like, in terms of recalibrating this, assuming that, the market for Brogdon is not there.
Yeah. And that's, I guess, where my mind goes is like, okay, so let's just assume that they're going to have to carry Brogdon, that's going to increase your, tax ramifications, but it also means you're definitely moving on from Grant. You're exploring sign and trade options, but short of another second round pick, which, like,
get ready.
We're loving it here in Boston. I don't know if you're necessarily getting more than that. I don't think you're getting back a rotational piece, at least without compromising your ability to then use the taxpayer mid-level. So which gives you the better option? Like, can you sign and trade Grant to Dallas and get something back that is more helpful than what you could have got at the taxpayer mid-level? And that's just where it is. And even with the taxpayer mid-level, like, you use it, now you're hard capped, and now it's like you got to be you can't get up. I don't know. It gets really difficult to maneuver during the season. So I don't know if I guess my inclination is, short of a Brogdon deal materializing, I'm not sure there's something that's going to knock our socks off that's going to happen from here. I think it's just trying to find one more piece with the small assets that you have remaining. And, whether that's another big that, Joe feels comfortable leaning on and sparing some of the Porzingis, Robb, Al, especially on nights where they all can't play. Or, another big wing, but like maybe they just feel like Walsh can be that guy. And if he shows a good summer, and I don't know, like, am I crazy to think, like, I just don't see the roadmap to any big craziness moving forward. And yet it certainly feels like there's another shoe to drop at some point.
For sure. And I think, it's like it goes through Brogdon. Yeah. And what the question is, I think that, the front office will have to have right now is being like, and I think we look at Brad's track record, he likes to make his bigger moves in the offseason. Outside of the Derek White deal, he likes to do, like, he wants to start fresher. So it's like, do you have something now? Can you find something now in the next week or two where you have this extra ammo now that it's expendable draft pick wise, where you can get that done? And I think that's probably I imagine their top priority, like you alluded to, like, were these simultaneous deals with Brogdon and Smart that were going to go on? Like, I think it's a very reasonable possibility here based on the timing of how it worked out. And so now the question is, can you get that done? And I think they're better positioned to get that done now after draft night. The question is, how does the market play out?
Second round picks, so hot right now.
Gotta get them while they're hot. All right, Chris Forsberg, NBC Sports Boston. Thank you for coming on after a 48-hour odyssey for the ages here. Great. And I'm glad that our Celtics Talk pod on Porzingis kind of held up.
Still get all the views. That's all
exactly.
That matters.
Go get some rest. We'll talk to you once free agency kicks off here.
CLNS Media's Celtics coverage is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win.